Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hindu Explainer series. I am Sagar Joshi and very warm greetings from Law Prep Tutorial. So, as you know, we begin a new week and this could be the week where details about the date of your examination could be told or the new meet of the CLAT consortium. So, I know it is anxious time, but until the date is finally confirmed, information that is there in the newspaper still becomes important. Issues in the newspaper are still important, all right? So this coming 2 weeks will also see the G7 summit, which Prime Minister Modi was supposed to attend in physical, but he would be participating in it virtually, or how he would participate, those details will come out. Then the NATO summit is about to take place, and the summit between Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin will also take place. So those information from those summits does become important for your examination point of view. But before we dive into that or today's newspaper analysis, certain doubts from yesterday. So a lot of you have been asking doubts about sedition in general. So I believe that it's better to have a separate video for sedition in general. I'll speak to Anupama ma'am and we'll try to arrange that for you so that you get a lot more clarity about the topic, because it is definitely part of the news. All right. So all those doubts we'll try to address all of them there. Then moving on, another doubt was how many of these variants do you need to learn? So as I told you, all the 4 variants of concern are definitely needed to be learned. All right. They are in the radar of coming for your examination, so they are definitely far more important. Then there was question of what is GDP, and so many institutions give details and predict about GDP growth. So see, growth figures projections not important, all right? Even if certain coaching institutions that you may see will give you projections, are definitely not factually correct, all right, until the propensity is realized. So for example, whenever you go to an astrologer in India, we have a thing of astrology. 10 different astrologers will tell you 10 different predictions about yourself. Some of them may come true, some of them may come partially true, but in an examination that is based on factual information, all right, all of this cannot happen. You need information that is factually reliant or capable of being confirmed. Therefore, projections of GDP are definitely not part of current affairs questions because they cannot be confirmed. They keep on changing. There is no confirmation about it. All right. So avoid that. Final GDP figures definitely becomes important. What is GDP in general? GDP is basically the value added in terms of goods and services over the time period, or it is also all the goods plus investment that the country has consumed over the past 1 year. All right. So that there are different projections of GDP. I think because a lot of you have doubts about it, tomorrow I will do an in-depth analysis telling you different mechanisms of GDP quantification. Then moving on, the last doubt a lot of you have been asking about the Model Tenancy Act. The Model Tenancy Act is a model act in general about tenancy laws, people who want to be tenant. And the only new thing with this new Tenancy Act is that it tells the state governments who frame the rent laws of the country that, see, don't set a upper limit of rent, because a lot of land grabbing or property grabbing happens through tenancy. Tenants stay out on the old tenancy or rent control for a long time period and then acquire. So that is the one new thing in the Tenancy Act, that it does not set a upper limit on tenancy laws. It also, this is a model act. States need to adopt it on their own through their own legislations for it to come into picture. All right. So moving on with today's newspaper analysis, on the front page, we have a study about comparison between the two vaccines that have been administered in India, that is Covishield and Covaxin, that Covishield produces far more antibodies against COVID-19 and therefore would be far more efficacious. All right. So this is in general data related to vaccination. On the other side, so we will be getting new vaccines. It is something that you need to be in the loophole. The reason why we have highlighted it is because the nature of these two vaccines in itself is part of your examination perspective. All right. While Covaxin uses a dead virus or COVID-19 virus, Covishield uses a modified adenovirus from chimpanzees to create these antibodies in our body. All right. On the left hand side, there is data about another rankings. What are these rankings? These are the performance grading index by the Education Ministry. This year, HRD Ministry was renamed as the Education Ministry. During Rajiv Gandhi's time period, Education Ministry was turned into Human Development Ministry, HRD, Human Resource Development. It has now been renamed to Education Ministry again, and they have come out with the rankings of this year of education performance, that how did states perform during education. Why is this survey important? This is prior to the pandemic, just before the pandemic hit us. The data is about that. So next year also would be important, that how much were we able to provide education in terms of virtual when the schools were shut, because a lot of loss of education has taken place. Once again, ranks in itself become important to be noted down. The territory of Ladakh has the lowest score of 545. It has the lowest score in general in comparison to the entire country's average. Then moving on, apart from this, on the front page is, since February pact, all quiet on LOC. Since for past 100 days, so this year in February, India and Pakistan agreed on a ceasefire agreement that there will be no shelling, there will be no intrusion. That in this regard, a lot of shelling used to take place on the border to help intrusion in the territory of the country. That has now been stopped because it is seen that peace has returned on the border of India-Pakistan in general. This had raised hope that relations would be normalized, but none of that has happened. This puts into limelight once again the issue that was there in February when we had discussed it. All right. Then moving on the national news, in Delhi, a lot of conflict is going on between the Delhi government and the central government about delivery of ration at doorstep. That is the controversy, not that much important for us. Then moving on, this page is about more and more national news, not relevant for us, on the editorial section. So recently, when the moment coronavirus outbreak had taken place, it was considered a speculation that the COVID-19 virus was not actually a natural virus, but was lab created. But this was discarded as a conspiracy theory in general. And China also, where it was believed that this had taken place, had also stated that this is untrue. But recently, two things happened. WHO team, which went to China to investigate the origin of coronavirus, stated two things. First, that if it is believed that bats are the closest to COVID-19, their genetic data is only 96% similar to the COVID-19 virus that was first detected. In biological terms, 96 to 100%, 4% gap would require mutation for decades. The second thing that came out of that report was that it stated it is highly unlikely that the virus could have released from the lab. That extremely unlikely was the term used. But what it meant was that this cannot be completely discounted. And later on, a new research article has been published by Nicholas Wade. The article name is Bulletin of Atomic Scientist, that's the journal in which it was published, the origin of COVID, did people or nature open Pandora's box at Wuhan? Why is Wuhan in such limelight? Because Wuhan habitates in its own BSL 4 standard laboratory, which is the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which is a biosafety level of 4, which is the highest. In terms of this, now two things have come that see, it is likely a US intelligence report marks that prior to the Wuhan outbreak of coronavirus, 3 doctors or workers at the lab had taken sick. There is no data about what sickness were they complaining of or what happened. Secondly, based on this article, it has now been confirmed that this article raises a lot of questions about coronavirus actually being naturally created. That it is possible that this was modified human creation and it leaked from Wuhan. The problem with this is, now, if it had leaked from a lab, two things happen simultaneously. One, all the scientists in USA who have stated that, see, this is very unlikely, had jumped the bus and stated this even before they had real evidence of the origin of coronavirus itself. Now, more details have come that these scientists had been funding, including Anthony Fauci of USA, who had been the head scientist for response of COVID-19, that they had personally invested in the research of creation of these coronaviruses in labs, and that their investment was at risk. And if this had happened, this would be under the international principles. China and all these people who had invested in this creation would be liable to pay damages to all those people who have suffered because of COVID-19. That it is because of their actions that something so dangerous came out and so many people have died because of it. And they would be responsible. In that regard, this is what the theory is. Right now, it has not been confirmed either way. But this is what the question is. And this is the background story. That first, WHO did not confirm. There is a lot of genetic difference between the two. That is the bat and the actual coronavirus. Then secondly, US intelligence report of doctors getting sick. And after this, the research article by Nicholas Wade, which questions and states that the coronavirus is actually man-made. And then more reports coming out of doctors who had called the man-made COVID-19 theory as a conspiracy theory. They have investment interest in the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And therefore now, this entire theory has once again become in the limelight. Now, is this relevant from examination perspective? Probably. Why? Because the origin of coronavirus then is a question that can be asked. Until now, it was believed it was a zoonotic virus or a zoonosis, that through the process of zoonosis it came. When a disease from animal to human happens, then it puts into question the zoonosis process has been in question. If DNA of the virus or something has been created, then the Nobel Prize recently in chemistry, which is for CRISPR tool. The CRISPR tool is the mechanism through which DNA can be amended. That becomes in limelight. So you may get questions from either side based on either of these theories. All right. The last thing in this regard is the biological convention, that is biological and toxic weapons convention. Both of this international convention does not describe or call into question virus as a mechanism of biological weapons, that diseases could be armed for as weapons against population is something that has not been fathomed till now, because it was seen this is not possible that you can create a disease and kill people, or that you can artificially create a disease. But now that this is there, international questions have been raised and legal analysis is going on of whether this should now be done to prevent and enforce liability in such regard. So this is what the main editorial is. Then on the left hand side, media and sedition, that the Supreme Court ruling of Vinod Dua versus Union of India, which we have discussed in depth, that this now calls into question that certainly sedition should be removed, as because even if it is known that criticism does not mean sedition, it is still used because leaders and their supporters cannot take criticism of their political class, and it is therefore it becomes personal, and whosoever has power uses sedition to curb dissent in general. Then on the second one, diminishing options, that RBI has little room to use interest rates for achieving policy outcome. What is the policy outcome that is RBI is looking? Which is to kickstart growth, which is to kickstart demand. But now RBI has very limited scope to do it. Why? Because interest rates are low, that is at 4%, repo rate is already at 4%. Doing it below it would not make much difference in actual price of credit, and until there are other measures that the government takes, RBI has very limited options on its own to do anything about the economy. This is the same situation that has been present in Japan. Japanese growth has stalled since 1980s, 1990s onwards, and their central bank kept interest rate low for a long time, which has now meant that the room, or whenever we look for which authority can do something about kickstarting economic growth, the RBI or their central bank has now limited options. So the editorial highlights that. Then on the right hand side, our former Central Union Minister Jairam Ramesh has written a new book, The Light of Asia. This is based on a poem and teachings of the Buddha. So he is a renowned author in general for different books that he has written. First highlighting, recently had written a book about our defense minister during 1962, a checkered brilliance. Prior to that, he had written about P.N. Husker, a bureaucrat who was very close to our former Prime Minister Indira Gandhi. Then moving on op-ed, behavioral changes can reduce transmission. This is talking about that what can we do to make people wear masks. And then the left hand side, recognizing sex work as work. That in India, a lot of stigma and taboo is attached, that no one, sex work or earning money while indulging in sexual acts is wrong. But all of this leads to more stigmatization of those who indulge in it. There is a presumption that no person who has resources would actually indulge in it. This is something that is not there in Western or anywhere, a lot of countries in the world, where people actively do indulge in this kind of work. But during COVID-19, different high courts have to had specific orders so that relief aid could be provided to sex workers, that is food rations and medical facilities in general, because no one would provide them with all of this. And in 2013, the Justice Verma Commission had also recognized that there is a need to differentiate between trafficked women, women who have been forced to do this work, and commercial sex workers and adults who actually, with their own consent, got into this work because it gives a lot of money. So that is that we as an Indian society and our parliament should recognize sex work as work and not as a social problem, that this should not be done in general. Then moving on the other national news, more political news in general, then is the controversy recently erupted yesterday about the Govind Vallabh Pant Institute of Postgraduate Medical Education and Research, where order was issued that only Hindi or English should be used as language. This puts into question for us in general for the official languages in India. So Schedule 8 of the Indian Constitution talks about 22 languages that are important, that are official languages of the country, that these are constitutionally recognized and protected languages of the country. India is also the country with one of the highest original languages and dialects that are spoken by different populations. Even Hindi, different parts, different languages in themselves have sub-dialects in its own, and therefore they have been officially recognized. So these 22 and the schedule that relates to them becomes important from constitutional point of view. See, current affairs news can not always be directly related to current affairs on its own. All right, related topics to it. So if it is legal section, if it is constitution section, you need to note that from current affairs news. All right, so schedule 8, 22 languages, all of them become important in terms of this controversy. Then moving on the international news. So the first international news is about ahead of summit with Putin, Biden backs European allies. In stark contrast to his predecessor, that is Donald Trump, who would be close or seen closer to Russia, or would take a lighter stand against Russia and criticize his own allies, Joe Biden, while embarking on the NATO and G7 summit, has called and backed his own allies to work closely with them and also democratic countries. This is in confirmation that Joe Biden sees India also as part of this larger democratic alliance grouping against Moscow and Beijing. So this puts into importance the G7 and the NATO summit and what could happen during the US-Russia summit between Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin. Then on the right hand side, online group digs deeper into coronavirus leak theory. This is different virtual members who have formed a new group. What is this group known as? It is known as Drastic, Decentralized Radical Autonomous Research Team Investigating COVID-19. Their aim is to find out whether the lab leak was actually there or not. Different members, a member from India also, whose identity is not known but calls himself the Seeker, has given out this report about the Drastic group who there. Then Donald Trump made his appearance at GOP convention. This is US politics in general. And apart from this, the Delta variant is 40% more transmissible than other coronavirus variants in general. So this is therefore, which was originally seen as the Indian variant. And we know research has come that Indian second wave was also primarily because of the Delta variant of coronavirus. Then moving on, pained over Canada school deaths, Pope, but this is in response to reports of what was happening, the bodies that have been discovered under institutions that were run by the church, but the Pope stopped short of apologizing for the actions of the Vatican in general. So this needs to be seen. This is part of general Vatican related interest. Apart from this, on the sporting news, there is, as we get closer to Olympics, different world records become important for us. All right. So those are part of your sports related news. You can definitely expect one passage or a couple of questions from sports in general. Therefore, so Sifin, that is Sifin Hassan of the Netherlands, fired a warning. She set the new world record in women's 10,000. So who has set the new world record? This is Sifin Hassan of Netherlands. She clocked 29 minutes and 6.82 seconds. She clocked 10,000 meters. She beat the previous record of 29 minutes 17 seconds by going 10 seconds quicker. All right. So these world records, as we get closer, become important from your sporting section. On that note, I'll conclude for the day. In today's newspaper, the origin of coronavirus, that's an important thing. Then the second is world record, and thirdly, the summits that will become important for all of you in general: G7, NATO summit, and the summit between Joe Biden and Vladimir Putin. On that note, thank you so much, and I will see you all tomorrow.